What if pain isn't the problem, but actually the pathway back to you? You're listening to The Leadership Wound, From Pain to Permission. I'm Amanda Rohr, your host and founder of Authentically You, coaching for embodied spiritual living and leading. This is where we get honest about the real cost of leadership, the burnout, the pretending, the rejection, and the return to your authentic self. Because this isn't about performance, it's about permission. Welcome to the leader you've always been.
And so my working definition of leadership now is going first, that's part one, in the service of others, part two. So for me, leadership isn't just about going first and going wherever I want to go and trying to get people to follow me, trying to get people on board with what I think should happen. I think whenever I see something that's happening in my community or in my space or my neighborhood or whatever it may be, something that wants to happen, but it's going to take someone who will, whatever. Sometimes the metaphor, I see myself as like hacking through a jungle with a machete and like getting, who's going to be the one who gets hit in the face with a vine? Who's going to be the one that's kind of taking it on the chin and willing to clear the path or willing to, go into the unknown so that something is possible.
That's an unglorious picture of leadership. And it's beautiful, though. It's beautiful because we often think the leader rises up. You could say they're the first, but this is an example of, no, I'm the one who's taking it on the chin. I'm the one getting the cuts and the scrapes, the bruises, all for the service of those who will be coming behind me. Welcome back to The Leadership Wound. I'm Amanda Rohr, your host and founder of Authentically You coaching and also of the Leadership Wound podcast. This is the place where we talk about the hidden cost of leadership, what it looks like to move from pain to permission into wholeness through that journey. And today's episode is a special episode in the midst of my ongoing podcast called Unscripted Conversations. These conversations show up throughout the season, and they are meant to be less like a formal interview and more like sitting down with a good friend with a cup of coffee or tea, which I have mine right here, and Ericka has her, just talking with someone who's willing to be honest about their leadership and what it's been like for them. In these episodes, we move through 4 different movements. We start first with what's our definition of leadership? Then we move to what is authenticity in the real world? What does leadership cost us? What are the wounds with being in leadership? And lastly, what have we learned through the healing process? My goal is to sit down with everyday leaders, a diverse array of leaders, men, women, those in formal roles, those not in formal roles, and ask them about their leadership journey. And the hope is that hearing many voices around the same theme can give us a more fuller picture of what leadership looks like today. Today, I'm excited because Ericka Henry, a good friend of mine who I met in a ministry context, is with us, and she's going to share a little bit about her wounds and her healing journey throughout that process. Ericka is a pastor, a church planner, a missional practitioner with nearly 15 years of leadership experience. Fun fact, she co-planted her first church at age 19, which I believe I was still in college learning a bunch of stuff. So that's pretty impressive. I can't wait to hear that story. And since then, she has led discipleship development, organizational change, and anything from microchurch communities to megachurch teams. She currently lives in Allentown, Pennsylvania with her husband, son, and beloved St. Bernard, where she does grassroots, Jesus-centered community building through the Holy District Network. Her leadership spans community development, disciple making, and institutional engagement. She also writes, consults, and speaks about the future of the church and what faithful leadership looks like. She's also the host of the Holy District podcast. Ericka, what an impressive list of experiences. Welcome to the Leadership Wound. We are so excited that you are here. to talk with me and my audience. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll wait. If I were you, I'd wait to be impressed until after we talk about
All those
what all
things.
those experiences have been like.
Oh, if we could all live up to, yes, our credentials that are by our name.
Yeah.
So today I want to start by going back to the beginning a bit, maybe for you. I mentioned that you had planted your first church at 19, which is wild to think about, just wild. Let me ask you this question. Go back to that 19-year-old self. What did leadership look like to you at 19? As you first took your formal steps into formal leadership? Yeah, if you can remember back then, what did leadership mean to you, look like? How would you define it?
Yeah. Whenever I was 19, helping to co-plant this first community that I was a part of, I found myself in leadership kind of by accident. I grew up in a context that did not affirm women in ministry, at least not in all levels of leadership. And I had a really varied experience of how people interpreted what women could and couldn't do. The reason why I was 19 years old helping to plant a church is because I was leading different kinds of ministry groups, young adult groups in the church that I was a part of, and experienced my first really deep leadership wound with the pastor of that congregation, which this is a long story. We can go into it if you want to, but it led in that pastor actually kicking my boyfriend, soon to be fiance, and I out of his congregation at that point in time. And so really, I didn't set out to be a leader or to plant a church when I was 19. I was removed from my church community that I'd been a part of for several years, and I didn't know where to go. And there were a few other people who were proximate to the situation who were also feeling pretty marginalized and really disoriented. And what began as like, okay, well, we can't stop worshiping. We can't stop following Jesus. We can't stop investing in our faith, led to weekly gatherings where we were getting together in a home and eventually turned into the first church that I was a part of planting. So in that space, I think leadership for me just looked like doing something I didn't know how to do because I needed it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find it anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that has been a through line in my life, that oftentimes the moments that have pulled me into leadership have been moments that asked me, okay, there's something that you need to be well and you can't find it. So will you go first?
Will you step out
Will
and
you step
do
out?
it?
Yeah. And obviously really imperfectly, because as a 19-year-old, I was 19 years old. Yeah.
Let's emphasize that you were 19.
19, I didn't know anything. I was naive enough to just trust that Jesus would see me through. And I'm really lucky to have held on to that naivete for most of my life and ministry. But yeah, there's certainly a foolhardiness to being young where and starting the church that we started by the time that we understood that we were going to try to plant a new congregation. I really did have this feeling of like, well, if we're doing it, then we'll do it better. And it's going to be this great place and everything's going to work because we won't do this and we'll do that. And, it wasn't that simple and it wasn't that easy.
That's the 19-year-old in you. How about it? Yes. So leadership for you was this internal just feeling compelled. I need to follow. I'm not seeing this here. I need to go out and model that. What did you have to do to become that kind of person to be able to hold that at that age?
I don't know. That's such an interesting question. It was a really painful time for me because really in that experience I wasn't seeking leadership. I wasn't seeking to go out and do my own thing. I was really seeking to serve and be a part of something bigger than me. And I think that God has wired me to be a person who is creative, a person who has a lot of faith, a person who wants to try new things, who can imagine and see potential and then move toward it. And there was an aspect of that the congregation I was a part of was really appreciated. But then there was an aspect of that I think felt threatening. to the existing leadership. And so I kind of kept finding myself in this place where the people that I was serving with wanted me to be leading in some capacity, but then did not like the way that I showed up in my leadership because it maybe challenged the status quo, or or I have a tendency to question why things are the way they are and whether they might be better. What might it look like to move towards something new? And what new wineskins that Jesus might be offering us to pour our ministry into. And that's is not always wanted in, certain organizational or institutional context. And so I think part of that is just how God wired me.
Yeah.
And then another part of it was, I think during the time period where I was processing that pain, 19-year-old, not really understanding the Psalms, not really understanding David crying out and about being overcome by enemies and feeling totally disoriented and abandoned. And I remember during that time period in my life, I just spent a lot of time studying the Psalms because at 19, I think that was one of the first times that I could start to relate to some of that experience that now I can see so clearly in the Psalms of Lament. And that was where I started to develop my practice of lament for the first time. I felt very confused. I felt very angry. For a while, I wanted bad things to happen to the pastor who did that to me and to my loved ones. And I just had to keep on coming back to Jesus with that and telling Jesus the truth about that, and finding communion with the authors of scripture who felt the same way for different reasons and at different times, until I could just move forward and have this ongoing cycle of anger and confession and forgiveness and repentance. And that has been now a long, well-worn cycle.
Path and journey.
Yes.
And it's often our woundings that bring us closer to the Lord. It is definitely a process. When you look at how you would have seen or defined leadership when you were 19 and now you look at it, what is maybe the differences? I think because we all come to this concept of leadership or leaders and we define it differently amongst ourselves, but we also define it differently at different ages because of our experiences. Are you able to maybe see how you viewed or saw or experienced leadership younger you? Not that you're old at all, but more wiser you now. Like, what's the difference between what you've learned about it?
Yeah, so that younger version of me had received a model of leadership that was very much that a leader is the person who is in charge. The leader is the person who makes decisions. The leader is the person who sets the tone and the vision for a particular community. And that it's the leader's responsibility to kind of get people on board and move them in a particular direction. And as the leader of that church kicked me out of his church because he did not perceive that the way the Spirit was moving us was aligned with his vision and his direction for the church, that brought that model of leadership under an immense amount of suspicion for me. And I started wrestling with that in that season of disorientation. And then along the way, I experienced different versions, I think, of that same model, whether it was in the smaller church in my hometown or the mega church with, 10,000 people, where this frame for leadership is this huge burden of a person who needs to be able to hear from God on behalf of hundreds or maybe thousands of people, set direction, set goals and outcomes, and then kind of steward people and resources toward those goals and outcomes. That form of leadership is one that I have really left behind personally.
Yeah.
And what I would say, though, is the same. Like in my example, when you asked me what was my leadership like when I was 19, I don't know how much leadership it really was, but this idea of going first.
Yes.
That has been a through line. And recently with the group of pastors that I have the great joy of getting to co-labor with in the Holy District Network, we've been talking about a definition of leadership, a working definition of leadership, and looking at Jesus's teachings where he says, hey, the leaders and in this world, they seek power and they lord it over people, but not so with you. The person who wants to be the greatest should be the least. The person who wants to be the greatest should be the servant of all. And so my working definition of leadership now is going first, that's part one, in the service of others, part two. So for me, leadership isn't just about going first and going wherever I want to go and trying to get people to follow me, trying to get people on board with what I think should happen. I think whenever I see something that's happening in my community or in my space or my neighborhood or whatever it may be, something that wants to happen, but it's going to take someone who will, whatever. Sometimes the metaphor I see myself as like hacking through a jungle with a machete and like getting who's going to be the one who gets hit in the face with a vine, who's going to be the one that's kind of taking it on the chin and willing to clear the path or willing to go into the unknown so that something becomes possible.
That's an unglorious picture of leadership. And it's beautiful, though. It's beautiful because we often think the leader rises up. You could say they're the first, but this is an example of, no, I'm the one who's taking it on the chin. I'm the one getting the cuts and the scrapes, the bruises, all for the service of those who will be coming behind me. I love also that picture of disorientation between what has been stated as what true leadership is, and then you're like, okay, wait a minute, but this is my experience, this is how it felt, this is what I went through. Something does not seem right. And then from that you go out and search for it.
Yeah. And I think, if it weren't for the example of Jesus, I think I would have just been totally lost. I don't think I would have made it through any of the phases of disorientation that I could, go back and share about in my life. But I could always look at the Gospels and I could say, Jesus would not treat me that way. I could look at the Gospels and I could say, Jesus didn't seem to care about that the way that you seem to care about that. Or talking to myself, okay, Ericka, Jesus doesn't seem to care about the thing that you are so tied up in knots over. So what's going on here? Without the example of leadership that I see in Jesus and the way that he brings the kingdom of God from heaven to earth, I think I just would have assumed, okay, this is what power looks like.
Yeah.
And this is how people with influence wield power. And maybe my options were just to opt in and play the game or opt out and have influence or not agentic in the world. But I look at the person of Jesus and I'm like, oh, those aren't my only options. Like there's a whole different way to be a leader that's oriented around this totally different set of values and convictions and goals. And so that, I can just constantly hold myself or others up and say, okay, so you say you follow Jesus. Are you leading the way that Jesus led? And I say I follow Jesus. Am I leading the way that Jesus led? And that's really where what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's perfect. And it's not about a lack of power. It's about, is it power for or power over?
And I would also add, I think there's a third option, which is power with. Power with.
Yes.
And this has been a big part of my journey of planting Holy District in Allentown, working in a community that is materially impoverished, that have been used to forms of power, especially in the church and kind of nonprofit ministry, that people approach them either to have power over them or to have power for them. And what that does to communities who have been like generationally and systematically treated like they do not have inherent dignity or worth or a contribution to offer is it kind of tells them, this is how we see you. We need to do this for you because you can't do it for yourself.
Yeah.
And then ultimately for representing God, then we could be unintentionally saying to them, and this is how God sees you, that you in some ways are deficient in the way that I am an image of God, you are not. So I need to do this for you. And so like we talk about withness.
I love that.
In the Holy District Network, that the kind of power that we see in Jesus is that Jesus comes to be with us. And yes, in his withness, he does things for us that we could not do. But he does that from a position of with, not over, but with.
Yes.
And what does it look like for us to be receiving that from Jesus, but then also cooperating with Jesus in our neighborhoods and in our communities and our families.
And it brings back autonomy to
Mhm.
individuals. So that's really, really good. Where have you seen like everyday, ordinary leadership? So you're taking your definition of what you mentioned of going first, going with, and then what was the second one?
Going first in the service of others.
Yes, in the service. Yes. Where would you say is some unexpected places that you've seen leadership? It doesn't have to be from you, but from others with those definitions.
Yeah, someone who's coming to mind is a member of our community. Her name's Ericka Montalvo, and she is this little Hispanic lady that lives on our block. She's from Puerto Rico originally, and she and her husband have lived on 9th Street for close to 40 years. And whenever I came to Allentown to plant Holy District, they were some of the first people that we met because they were so present and so active and so connected on the block where my husband and I moved that they were kind of the key to the kingdom here. They were what kind of in missional circles we would call the people of peace. They were the people through whom the gospel that we were excited to share had the broadest amount of impact and could reach the most people in our community. And so when we started experimenting and kind of iterating here on this block, I had the inclination and prayer to reach out to Sally and ask for her help. And this is where kind of these contrasting views of leadership come from, because to be in a position of powerlessness, to be in a position of need, and to ask your community that you're here to serve for their help can sometimes feel very counterintuitive to someone who sees himself as a leader. But when Jesus sent his disciples out 2 by 2, that's exactly the kind of posture he sent them out in. He said, don't take anything with you. Don't take an extra pair of shoes. You go, and whoever invites you to stay with them and eat what they give you and stay with them as long as you can. That he sent his disciples with the good news of the kingdom and the power and the authority to heal disease and to cast out demons. But he also sent them from a place of need. He sent them
in need. Yes.
Yeah, he ensured that they would be dependent on the people that they were being sent to. And so that's how we arrived in this neighborhood. I had some college level Spanish classes, and this is a majority minority community, mostly Spanish speaking. And here Sally and her husband Mike. Sally speaks Spanish, Mike is bilingual. God makes sure that we get introduced to them within the first few weeks that we're here. And then eventually asked Sally for help. Hey, we would like to host a community meal. Would you be willing to help us do that? And she said yes. And Sally, from that point, invited everybody on the block, would not allow us to bring any of the food, coordinated this entire potluck situation. And we just showed up that weekend in a space that God had given us, unlocked the doors and set up the chairs and the table, and in come 40 or 50 people from the neighborhood that I didn't have relationships with yet. But Sally had been building so much trust and rapport because she is a leader in our neighborhood. And so how did Sally go first in the service of others? Well, here, my husband and I, 2 white people moving into this community, having not been here, knowing very little about the various cultures and things that are happening in this space. Lots of people weren't really sure about us, understandably so. Why are they here? Why did they move to this neighborhood? There weren't a lot of
their agenda.
What's their agenda? What do they want?
Yeah.
And so Sally went first, and she invited and she leveraged her resources, her relational rapport, in order to convene the first gathering of the Holy District. And from that point, we got to meet so many more of our neighbors, and we said, we'll be here next week and we'll have free coffee and you're welcome. All you got to do is just talk to somebody. If you come back next week, just talk to somebody. About 20 or 30 people return the next week. And then out of those 20 or 30, we have baptized and welcomed more than half of them into our community, into our worship gatherings. And then that's expanded all of our community gatherings as well. And so if it weren't for Sally going first and then, bringing together the neighborhood, I don't even know that I would be here. I might have, packed up my bags and moved back to Illinois or something, because without her leadership, none of would have been possible.
It's such a great example of like everyday leaders. I mean, we talk about the definition of leadership. Mine is quite simple. It's people of influence. And if you're a human, you have influence. And so that's such a great story of not having a role, a title, a salary attached to it. And yet she clearly is one of your leaders within the Holy District. And if we could see ourselves, all of us, in whatever capacity and role we have as a leader, that would be really cool. One of my core themes in my coaching work is authenticity, learning to lead from this true self, the person that you actually are, instead of the person that you should be, the person that people expect you to be. And you've lived in many different leadership environments. And so I want to just ask you this question. When did you realize you couldn't lead as the person that you were expected to be? The person that they told you to be, which may in the beginning have been a quiet, submissive woman who doesn't need to lead on the out front. I don't know. But yeah, when did you realize you couldn't lead as you were expected to?
Yeah, I have a distinct moment in my journey with Jesus that I can share about. And it's interesting because I did grow up in a context that did not affirm women in ministry. And there were a variety of people who held that belief of quiet, submissive woman. But I always, for whatever reason, I always knew I wasn't going to be able to do that.
I cannot live up to that. I mean, I got to be honest. You said to yourself, and so do I.
Yeah, I don't ever think I tried to perform that aspect of my identity. It just never felt within reach. Ask anybody who's ever known me. But what I did do in response to all of that environmental input was I internalized this idea that probably the person who I understood God said that I was and was calling me to be was not possible, that it would not be possible for me to be that person in the church. And so from the time I was 13, which is when I received my call to ministry, I locked myself in my bedroom with my Bible and I told God, I'm not leaving this room until you tell me what you want me to do, who you want me to be. And the Lord showed me some scriptures. And actually the main one, your mouth will speak words of wisdom. The utterance of your heart will bring understanding. He brought me to that passage. And I remember kind of closing my Bible and saying like, but how? Because in my environment, the frame that I had was the leader was the senior pastor. And maybe depending on the church, a woman could maybe be a teaching pastor, like maybe, if it was one of the less conservative churches in our area. And so I remember like receiving that word from God and then immediately going, and I closed off this part of me that said, you can't want that because you can't have that. So I kind of trained myself and conditioned myself to try to find a place where I could be faithful to God, but also be within the constraints of the environments that I had found myself in. And I just shut down this part of me that knew that God wanted to invite me into his mission and being someone who brings wisdom and clarity and teaching to folks.
So you shut that down. Let me stop you there for a moment. What did that look like? What did that feel like? What did that do to you to shut down a portion of yourself?
I would say that from that point, I was 13. So from that point forward, I think I was living a very disintegrated life. So I was at odds with myself. And I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. My emotional maturity at that point was very low. My emotional fluency was very, very low. And I have kind of in my life been a more stoic person. And like I would describe myself as pretty pragmatic. And I think I was just like, that's not an option for you. You can't want it. So, set your sights on something that's realistic. And moving forward from that, I think I was kind of looking at my leaders and my environment to say to me, this is where you're allowed to be you. And you can't be you everywhere all the time. You can't like be all of you everywhere all the time. You can be you in this way, or you can be you for this program because that will help us with our initiative. But as far as like welcoming and accepting the full you, this kind of bold and outspoken and futuristic woman, who has a foolhardy ability to just try crazy stuff and move forward. I kind of had this experience all the way until I left my last ministry assignment before coming to Plant Holy District, where I just kind of was offering myself up to the leaders in my environment saying, which parts of me will you accept? And then giving those parts of myself to them and feeling exploited.
Yeah.
And feeling used and harmed.
Yes.
Yes. Feeling
we'll take this part, but we're not going to take the other part.
Yes, objectified.
Yeah.
And I think for the longest time, I blamed the people around me for treating me that way. And certainly they are accountable for their actions. But the moment that is the answer to your question, I was in a church environment where I was giving everything that I could, even though I look back and I would say the word exploitation is how I would summarize what it felt like to be in this environment as a leader. And there were others, my coworkers and colleagues, that based on where I was at in the organization, were being kind of, elevated and uplifted and supported, even though there were some very big red flags about their character and how they were engaging in ministry and life otherwise, which the fruit bore out eventually. But they were being elevated, and they happened to be white men. They happened to kind of fit some of the cultural dynamics that kind of made it easier for them to be elevated. And I remember I was driving one day between campuses, and I got a message from someone that let me know one of these people had just, whatever it might be, got a promotion. I can't even remember what the exact thing was, but I remember getting that news, and I had been going through a really difficult series of months and years in that environment. I had male staff who treated me very disrespectfully. I was given really impossible kind of tasks. The church I was at, operated with the Billy Graham rule, but I was overseeing a team of 9 people, the majority of which were men who were usually 10 to 30 years older than me. So I was kind of always in this context where I was responsible for developing and resourcing and coaching people who may or may not respect me, who may or may not treat me with respect or speak respectfully about me, may or may not even be trying to work as a team and collaborate because they didn't respect my leadership. And then also, be held under suspicion if I'm needing to meet one-on-one with them because I'm their boss.
Yeah.
And so
and you're interested in growth. Yeah.
I was having to navigate all of these constraints that my male peers did not have to contend with and were not having to navigate.
Yeah.
And it was really hard. And so I got this random bit of news, and it just was whatever, the straw that broke the camel's back. And I remember I had to pull over into a parking lot because I was just crying so hard.
Yeah.
And I remember crying, and I remember saying out loud, like a prayer, I remember saying, they're never going to see me. That was I might cry now thinking about it. They're never going to see me. I had just felt like I was giving everything that I had, and it just wasn't seen. It just wasn't valued in the way that I yearned for it to be valued. While other people, in my perspective, and this is all my perspective, were operating in a very, very different way, but being elevated and valued, and it was really painful. And so I'm sobbing in my Prius in a parking lot, and I'm saying they're never going to see me. They're never going to see me. And I remember asking Jesus, why do you want me doing this? Why have you asked me to do this? Why do I have to be here?
Yeah.
And Jesus said to me, like in my heart, in my mind, no audible voice or anything like that, but Jesus said to me, I never asked you to do this.
I never asked you to prove yourself.
And I was like, what? And I mean, I think he just like said it to me like 3 times. I never asked you to do this. I never asked you to do this. I never asked you to do this. Like, there was so much in that.
Wow.
In that one line. And it just put a mirror to me. And I had to ask myself, then why am I doing it? And why have I been doing some version of this?
Yes.
My entire life? Why have I been doing some version of this my entire life?
Yes.
And And so that was the moment where I realized, yeah, okay. There's something in my conditioning that has made this the familiar path, which is I accept people and environment that have been enculturated to exploit me, whether or not they mean to or not.
Yeah.
And I have subjected myself to those
Yes.
kinds of environments.
Yes.
And I've been choosing into that for some reason. And Jesus, I need your help to stop choosing into that
Yes. Yes.
so that I can be my whole self.
Mm.
And once again, bringing that full thing back to like what I said earlier, like Jesus would never treat me that way. So there
Yeah.
he's saying to me, sis,
Yeah.
you've been doing this and I've been with you and it's
Yeah.
okay. But I didn't ask you. I didn't ask you
Yeah.
this.
I mean, when the light comes on and Jesus tenderly says to you, my dear, you are a part of this problem.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he does it in the most gracious way. He's not condemning, he's convicting. But when you realize that you are a part of this, that you are self-sabotaging, I believe that is some words that you and I have talked about before, self-sabotaging yourself
Mm-hmm.
because you've been conditioned. As too, with much grace and compassion I have to those other individuals who are a part of the
Mm-hmm.
problem, we are both swimming in the same waters,
Yeah. Yep.
being groomed to some degree that this is the way it is to be, that we can show up disintegrated,
Mm-hmm.
dismantled.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about that word authenticity, and I think about my coaching tagline is coaching for embodied spiritual living and leading. We are spiritual beings, and this integration of all of us. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Because I think a lot of us show up to different parts of our lives, our jobs, our relationships, not as whole people.
Mm-hmm.
We show up as we think you need me to show up,
Mm-hmm.
or I think I should show up,
Mm-hmm.
versus just being present and showing up. And that does something to your soul, doesn't it?
It does. And I want to say, I didn't experience that as a conscious choice
Yeah.
until I had this moment. And it was, I think, a very revelatory moment for me. And it's counterintuitive because on one hand, it can feel like, oh no, I'm part of the problem. But what I didn't know until that moment was that I could do something
Yes, about it.
about it. And
Yes, yes.
that was the power of the moment where when Jesus said, like, I
Mm.
never asked you to do this, I legitimately believed, Amanda, that when a pastor asked me to do something, I took that was God. I trusted that God was speaking through that leader or that pastor or in that congregation. And that was me mapping on some of my own like childhood wounds and things like that. But I just kind of took it for granted. Okay, like I'm a part of this church. I'm submitted to this community, and this is the leader of that church. And so if they're asking me to do this, then it's reasoned and it's coming from the Spirit, and I need to be ready to help in any way that I can. And then that was reinforced by people who, would tell me things like, well, Ericka, I know this is hard and I know this is painful and I know they're not treating you right. And I know that, that was totally uncalled for and whatever it might be. But if you leave, who's going to help us change? But this was the kind of feedback that, that I got. And it was this like very crazy making cycle that I was a part of. And so, I was being conditioned to believe that this was what it meant to be faithful to God. What it meant to be faithful to God was to allow people to use me.
Yeah.
And then whenever I started to understand, like, oh, that's Jesus didn't ask me to do that. So other people asked me to do that. And I said yes.
Yeah.
Then my question just became, okay, Jesus, what are you asking me to do?
Yes. Yes.
The thing about what Jesus asks us to do is it's always going to be for our good. But for me, I've also learned it often scares the pants off of me because it's for my healing, which means require confrontation with my wounds. It will require being a self, being a true self and taking my cues from who Jesus says that I am, and then kind of wobbly legged walking in that, even though everything around me is, trying to persuade me otherwise. If you look at Jesus and his disciples, they're just scared out of their mind the majority of the time. They're confused and they're scared. And he's just like, just follow me, They
Yes.
don't understand why he does what he does. They don't understand what he means when he says stuff.
Yeah.
He takes them across the Galilee into the
Yeah.
place where they would never go. He takes them through Samaria when
It's not like they were like, oh, this makes sense. It totally makes sense. Now I can go.
not at all. They were like, okay.
Why are we waiting for that?
Right.
Yes, yes. I love how you brought that back to the wounding. And in my own work, I'm deeply committed to normalizing this word wound, this leadership wound. People ask me, why did you name it the leadership wound? It's because we're all leaders, because I believe we all have influence. And if we're all leaders and we're human, which I believe we all are, that means we're going to get wounded. And the moment that we just decide to accept that doesn't mean we stay in our wounding. We heal, we grow, we probably get wounded again. It's this continually being made into glory thing. But when we ignore it, you mentioned like I had to confront my wounds. And like, why are we afraid to do that? Why are we afraid to stand up and say, I have wounds? One of my interviews that I did recently said, I have now begun to not trust a leader who hasn't been broken, who isn't honest enough to be able to verbalize their wounding, because we all are. Are you faking it and acting like you're not, sweeping under the carpet, but at some point it comes out, it will be known. A lot of times people know your woundings faster than you know them yourself. And so when you look back at your own wounding, and you probably answered this a little bit already, but where did you feel most understood, unseen in that wounding? Because you mentioned that they just won't see me. They're never going to see me. What aspect of your leadership was that about?
I think what it really came down to was my desire to be like a wholehearted person. And the experience that I kind of had time and time again that has been like the wound that got that festered and that kind of got repeated over and over again was there's this experience of we sense the spirit, in you, Ericka. We see that you're a gifted leader. Even in contexts where women aren't supposed to be leaders, I'm having people tell me clearly, God has gifted you as a leader. And here's the thing we think, we want you to do. Okay, so I'm like chomping at the bit because, of course, like every person, I want to belong. I want to contribute. I want to experience purpose in my life.
Yeah.
And especially in the context of my relationship to God, that I get to be a part of God's mission to redeem the world and to bring heaven to earth. So I'm like, yes, like, here am I, send me. I want put me in, coach. That has always been my attitude. And then so I jump in, I give my gifts, and then there comes a point when the people in that space are like, oh, whoa. We wanted this, but not that. Or like, here's this idea that I, spent this time working with these people and doing what you asked me to do. And here it is, and it's happening and it's flourishing. And maybe it's going better than you expected, or it's going different than what you thought. I have a way of, God gets me into situations where it quickly goes beyond the control of the people who are participating. And at that point in time, the thing that I had been giving would get crushed. It would get closed. It would get dismantled. It would get put through the institutional meat grinder and come out this totally different program, initiative, whatever it might be. And then just kind of the standard one was, here the Lord told me, your mouth will speak words of wisdom, the utterance of your heart will bring understanding. But I'm not allowed to preach a sermon. I'm not allowed to, there are some things I'm allowed to get up on the stage and do, but there are some things that I'm not. And so I'm allowed to speak and I'm allowed to preside and I'm allowed to, do this and do that. But when it comes to being able to share in, some category that, these environments created, that is where, we draw the line. Or, or if we let you do it, there's like all of this, all of these constraints and all of this judgment and analysis and
Very constricting.
Yes. And so I think that it just was always this experience of, you want part of me, but not all of me. But I really desire to be all of me. Like, I have a really fierce need to be my whole self and to be a person of integrity, which I don't just mean like that I don't lie and I don't steal and I don't cheat. But what I mean is that I am integral. I am the same thing through and through. I'm a pure being, that I'm not being diluted or objectified or compartmentalized. That's a deep need that I have just as a person. I couldn't find an environment that could hold that could hold
Yes.
without needing to use me or to try to kind of dampen me or kind of rein me in.
Yeah.
And that was very painful.
I can remember my own personal journey, and I don't even know if someone actually really said this or if that was just over time putting it all together. This is the language that I came up with, which was, what do we do with Amanda? We don't know what to do because we like these parts, we like this part, but we don't like this. And I wonder if at times, we're speaking about ministry context, but you could probably put it into any context. Why is it that we just like certain parts? And is it because it gets messy, which is wherever you have humans, you have humanness. It's messy. And do we know how to handle true authenticity, which is I'm showing up as my whole integrated self, which by the way means I've got some rough edges.
Sure.
I've got some areas where I'm not fully grown yet. I'm not wise in. I'm got some areas where I'm not making the best of choices, but these other areas like I'm excelling at. And so we like this, but we don't like that. I mean, what that does to a person at the end of the day says you really don't like me, because we all want to be fully known and fully loved, which is what we find in the presence of God, right? Yeah.
And it reminds me of Jesus's parable about the wheat and the tares, where he, tells a story that there was a field that was sown with wheat, and then the enemy comes through and sows all of these weeds or tares into it. And the workers say, we'll go out and we'll pull out all the weeds. But the owner says, no, you actually don't know the difference between the tares. So leave it. You need to leave it alone and let it grow up. And at harvest time, we will sort it all out, because only at harvest time can you really tell the difference between what's
the fruit
and what's there. And what I think maybe in a definition of leadership that I was taught whenever I was younger and that I saw modeled for me was like, the leader is the person who is sorting the wheat and the tares. Like, it's your job for the individuals that come to your, organization or your church. It's for your staff or your teams, whatever. It's your job to be looking at all of these people and you're figuring out what's good about them, what's bad about them, what works, what doesn't, what aligns with your vision, what doesn't. And then you're trying to get rid of the stuff that's making it harder for you to produce the crop that you want to produce.
Yeah.
And Jesus is saying to us, like, you are bad at that, y'all. Like, you will pull up wheat and you will leave weeds. Like, you don't actually know. And this is going all the way back to Genesis. What is the first sin? The first sin is taking from the tree of knowing good and bad. We think we know the difference. We think we know what is good. We think we know what is bad. But when we take that into our own hands, actually what happens is death.
Yes.
And so I have felt this radical permission from God as a leader where he's like, girl, it is not your job to be looking at your congregation, to be looking at even yourself and trying to uproot stuff in yourself or other people. Let's be in relationship. You trust me to prune. You trust me to be the gardener, and you grow up with me. You abide in me, and then you love the people that I bring to your life.
Your job is to love, to point, to model. I love that, Ericka. And a real life example for me. So Doug and I are empty nesters right now. So 3 college kids, making all kinds of decisions, going different pathways, some that maybe I would have chose, maybe I wouldn't have. And this period of life is teaching me so much about how to have my hands open and how to watch. And so many times I'm like, wow, I can remember to when I was a young adult. I think I turned out okay, but boy, did I not make some good choices. And your point about how, Amanda, do you really know what good is? Do you really know the pathway, the steps, the decisions, the choices that will actually bring about your maturation? Or in my example, the maturation of my children. And because they're 18, we have a fine line, Doug and I, when they graduate, turn 18, we will always be their parents, but we have now moved into friendship. And it's a different relationship, and it is teaching me, thank goodness for my children, teaching me what it looks like to do what you're saying. Good stewardship, good leadership. It's a lot of trust. It's a lot of taking away judgment and critique. It's a lot of praying. It's a lot of modeling first. But it's not this judgment of which I think is the easier route. And that's why we choose it, especially in the church. That's right. That's wrong.
And it's what we received, very likely, is that you received and what was modeled for us was leadership or authority that was really seeking control.
Yes.
And I one of the ways that I like to, instead of the word faith, I feel like faith, everyone has a different understanding of what it means to have faith. In our community, we just exchange that word for trust. Because if you say, I have faith in Jesus, what we mean is I trust Jesus, not I believe Jesus exists or I believe that God is real, but we're saying, no, I trust Jesus. And the question that Jesus, brings to me every time that I have this impulse to try to pull out that what I think is a tear.
Yeah.
Or try to control the people that God has brought me to love, is he asked me hey, sis, do you love that person more than I love them? Well, no, of course not. Okay, do you trust me with that person's journey?
Yeah.
Or do you think you need to be stepping in to, am I not doing a good enough job, with them? And so that brings me to have to confront, okay, why am I trying to exert control? Why am I struggling to trust Jesus with this person and their path? And usually it ends up being because I've got something going on in my life.
Exactly. You're putting your crap on them.
I'm projecting, I'm coping with my anxiety by projecting it onto other people.
Yes.
And so
my instability.
Yes. And Jesus just has been yeah, we're not doing that anymore. Or at least we're going to do that less and less and less and less and less because I'm going to help you so that you can be a less anxious person, so that you can show up and just accept the people that I'm entrusting to relationship with you, so that they can receive belonging and secure attachment and love and be delighted in as they are, so that they can grow. Because that's what we all need to grow.
Yes. And it doesn't mean that we can't ask compassionate curiosity.
Yeah.
We are called to be brothers and sisters, bring each other's burdens, accountability, which can mean a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. But we're still called to do those things, but it has to be reciprocated. And it's not judgmental, pointing fingers. Yes, I love that. And I bet that a lot of the woundings that we've experienced would be eradicated if we took that kind of posture. So moving lastly, as we kind of conclude, obviously wounding isn't where we want to stay, even though we're acknowledging that we all experience wounds at one time or another. We want to move towards healing. Take me through maybe an example or an overarching. How did you move from your wounding into this process of healing? What were the components that were a part of that process of your healing journey?
So, the Lord was so good and to provide this pathway for me out of everything that I knew that was wounding me into this very liminal space where my husband and I moved to Pennsylvania so that I could plant this experimental church that I didn't even really know what it was going to be like or how it was going to work. I just knew that, once again, 19-year-old me, I need a place where I can be well, and I haven't found a place like that. And so maybe I could follow Jesus into something. and experience that for myself. And we got to Allentown like right before the COVID pandemic started. And so, wow, what was so fascinating about that time was I spent a lot of my time in quarantine in a little tiny studio apartment, just being face to face with all of the shoulds that had been should on me. We try not to should on each other in our community here, but like there was this really there's this intense time of solitude and listening at prayer, where I remember in my journal, this is something I would do all the time. I'd be like, I'm afraid that, and then I would just write like 6 or 10 lines of like, I'm afraid that my life does not have meaning. I'm afraid that the things that people have said about me are actually true. I'm afraid that my motivations for being here are impure. I'm afraid that I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm the wrong person for this, like whatever it might be. And this is a practice that was so healing for me because now I was like kind of externalizing. And this is something that I talk about with some of my like clients that I get to work with is a lot of the woundedness that we are dealing with, we might have been conditioned to like internalize it and just like try to work it out within ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's so much power to just like getting it out. And I think this is one of the reasons why scripture says like confess your sins to one another so that they'll be healed. Like there's something just in the process of getting it out. And I was in quarantine. I mean, I had my husband to talk to. It wasn't like I needed to get on a stage and like tell everybody my deepest, darkest fears, but just even to move it from something that is inside of me to something that's outside of me. Like this is not me. My fears are not me. My wounds are not me. I am, this is something I feel right now. This is an experience I'm having. And Jesus might have something to say about that to me. And there would be times in listening prayer where he would be like, this is a problem actually. Like this is a misbelief that you have that I want to show you something different. But most of the time he would be like, of course not, or, whatever, like it would just open up this conversation. And that was a time where I feel like I was reattaching to God. I like as a divine parent, I actually came to Jesus in an environment that was very fear based. And so like, I would say my original attachment to God was very much like, are you saved? Can you stay saved? If you died today, would you go to heaven or hell? Like it was all really oriented around my ability to like stay on God's good side.
Yeah.
And so I feel like God was like rewiring our attachment where he was like, oh, I just love you. I just love you. You're scared. I love you. You're struggling. I love you. And you can't do anything right now. You're not even allowed to do anything right now. And like, I love you and I delight in you. And that was such a rewiring for me because I had just been instilled from the very time I was young, like I needed to do good things for God. I need to do big things for God. If my dreams weren't so big that only God could do it, then I was doing something wrong. Like I just received all of this messaging that made me think that it was on me to kind of like get God on my side and to keep him on my side. And God just showed up to me in that space of like, I am never not on your side. Like I am always for you. And once again, God disciplines his children because he loves us, but discipline means teach.
Yes.
And so I would say that was the first part of healing for me is just really like building this practice of confession, then experiencing God's like hovering delight, his constant acceptance of me, his constant delight. And from there, then I, really was able to start exploring the wound, going into that raw place because I wasn't doing it from this untethered place. I wasn't afraid anymore that if I told the truth about this, that God would abandon me or God would be ashamed of me or God would condemn me. I had this experience of God that I could tell the truth and that God would stay, and that my relationship with God wasn't under threat. And then that eventually, when we got to start gathering with other people and people came to faith and our worshiping community started to develop, that was a practice that then I felt very clearly from God to continue. And so in our own liturgy in the Holy District in Allentown, we have a time of confession where after we read the scripture together, anyone has the opportunity to just tell the truth. Tell the truth about what you heard in the scripture today. Tell the truth about what's going on in your life. Tell the truth about something you're believing or you might be misbelieving, and have a group of people hear you and hold you in that. And so this was one aspect of my leadership where I felt like I have to go first. And so for many, 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 many worship gatherings, I was the only person.
Yeah.
So I've noticed that this wound that I have with my dad has been like brought to the surface, and this is how I'm feeling about it. And I just wanted to share it with you guys. I'm kind of tender right now, and I don't see the way through, but I just had this conversation and I'm processing it, or whatever it might
Yes.
be. And and then another person started sharing with that kind of vulnerability, and then another. And that's a part of the healing process too, because when our wounds are so internalized, we get the feeling that we're the only person,
Ones. Yep.
right? And so once I started externalizing it and then like modeling that, and it was scary, I'm not gonna lie, like that was a hard thing to do. But then other people start sharing, and then there's this solidarity, and then there's this feeling of okay, you too and me too, and this is normal.
Yeah, and it's okay to express it and share it.
Yeah, and
Yes.
maintaining an environment where it wasn't appropriate to then try to tell that person what to do, or
Right.
or try to smooth that over, but just kind of sit in the discomfort of
Yes.
this is hard.
Yeah.
And so that's muscle that I've been building personally, and then that's muscle that our community has been building over time, so
Yeah.
that when a wound happens, it doesn't have to stay in my heart. It doesn't have to, it doesn't get trapped in my mind in rumination. It's got somewhere to go.
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. It has somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And it's not that we ignore or we don't tell the story that we have had them. I mean, I'm always amazed at why Jesus still had the scars. I mean, there's a story to tell about it. And so, but it's that it doesn't stay within us. It has somewhere to go. It has somewhere to go on the paper. It has somewhere to go verbally as you're confessing to one another. It has somewhere to go in the sense of that you don't have to carry it alone. Community, we heal in community. Yeah, light is being exposed through all of that. And the one thread that I love about all that is that you're not doing this alone. We're not meant to go through these trials and tribulations, wounds or whatever on our own. We're meant to bring other people along, which is 100% counterintuitive. I want to be like Adam and Eve, and I want to go hide because I'm ashamed.
Yes, and our relationship with shame is so powerful, and I think the
Yeah.
antidote to shame is sharing,
Yes.
but it feels so scary. And I think that the more that we can normalize as leaders environments that are accepting and hospitable to afflictive emotion, the more that people will feel comfortable sharing their wounds. It's when
Yes.
many of us have experienced that when we share our wounds, we are rejected.
Yeah.
Maybe from the time that we were very small, where we learn from our environment that the acceptable emotions and the acceptable experiences for us to share are limited to these.
Yeah.
You can be happy, you can maybe be angry, like they're depending on your family, your gender, social convention, but being confused, being upset, being scared, feeling ashamed. These are usually emotional experiences that get marginalized in families and relationships and in churches. And so we don't have psychological safety to tell the truth about what we're going through. But there's a song. I have a 5-year-old son, and I found this song whenever he was very little, and it's called The Feeling Song. I can't remember the name of the woman who wrote it, but she talks about how she's singing to her child, when you're sad or afraid, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, so it doesn't sit all alone in your heart. And then she goes through several different emotional experiences, ranging from fear and sadness and worry and happiness and pride, and the different ways to share that with someone who loves you. And that refrain, so it doesn't sit all alone in your heart. And that, I think, is the key to healing. We will not get through this life without wounds. It's normal. It's a part of living. So if you're not getting scraped up, you're probably
not living, and you're probably not leading either. Honestly.
And it's not your fault. It's not about blame. It's just about how do we create spaces within ourselves our relationship with God, if that's a part of your life and your practice, and then with trusted others, where the way that your experiences and your feelings, whether afflictive or positive, don't have to sit all alone in your heart. They have somewhere, a safe place to land.
Yeah.
And to be carried. I think that's what the New Testament is talking about when it says carry one another's burdens.
Yes.
Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn.
And in order to do that, we have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times it's not that people are trying to be malicious or that they don't want to hear your crap. It's that they literally are so uncomfortable. I mean, I've been around people who it is uncomfortable for them to watch whatever is going on, or it's stirring something in them. So they're projecting, and therefore we're not creating environments. And so the best thing that we can do for those communities is ourselves do our own internal work with the Lord first, and ourselves get comfortable with ourselves being uncomfortable. And then when we enter in, it's like we're creating this non-anxious presence, because I'm not anxious about your uncomfortableness or what you're going through, because I know exactly what that's about. I've been there. I've done that. So it's this, practicing that. Well, as we close, what is maybe one last thing, Ericka, you would want to tell leaders who are processing their own wounds currently?
Here's the thing that I would say. A lot of us have learned, and whether it's in our relationship to our primary caregivers or to God, thinking about God as divine parent, heavenly father, however, that, it's our responsibility to maintain connection. And I believe that that sends us then on this ongoing path to be seeking secure attachment, to be seeking security that we biologically need in order to grow. And I talk to so many leaders where they will, they'll be confessing to me. They'll say something like, I know I shouldn't care what other people think about me, but I do. Or I know I shouldn't worry about X, Y, or Z, but it's there. And it's back to that shoulding on ourselves idea here. And the thing that I love to say, and I believe this with all my heart, is of course you're seeking external validation. Of course you are seeking someone in your life who will reflect back to you that you matter, that you are worthy, that you're delighted in. Like, you don't have to be ashamed of the fact that you are wired
to want that. Yes.
So if we can just let go of the shame that we feel and stop shoulding ourselves into this feeling, oh, well, I shouldn't want that, so I'm not going to seek it. Then what we can do instead is find a way to begin experiencing secure attachment. And if you're a believer, then that does start with going to the Lord with things like listening prayer and having an experience through your spiritual practice, not just of telling yourself, well, God says that I'm his, masterpiece, or God says this or that, so it must be true. Insight is not transformation. We have to experience a different reality for our mind to be transformed.
Yes.
So let's just accept the fact that we need external validation, and that's how our brains and bodies are wired. And then let's find healthy ways to get that need met. If you're not someone who believes in God, then I believe that there will be people in your life that you can connect to who can provide a sense of secure attachment to you, who can hold space for you, who can, see you and reflect the goodness in you back to you. I believe that God will provide that for you. But if sometimes we don't even get to that point because we're so stuck in our shame cycles around needing some kind of attachment.
We're meant to need to be dependent. Yes, and that source of God being that.
Yeah. And there is no one, you cannot outrun, you cannot make enough mistakes, there's nothing about you that could keep God from loving you. There's nothing about you that could keep God from delighting in you. There's the you see is not the you that God sees. God is not going anywhere. God only ever wants your good. And so to really get to experience that and to find people and places that help you see God that way and help you see yourself that way, that's going to unlock all this other stuff and give you the courage that you need to do that differentiation, to do that maturing. That means confronting wounds and stuff like that. But I think that comes first. It's not something you achieve. It's something you receive. Sets you up to be able to grow and develop.
Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Ericka, for being transparent and raw and just sharing your story in real time. For those who are listening, where can they maybe learn a little bit more about you or connect with you if something is stirring within them?
Yeah, so probably the easiest way would just be to check us out on holydistrict.org. That's our church's, the network that I'm a part of, our website. You can fill out a contact form there. I'm not super engaged on social media, but you can find me on Facebook, Ericka Henry, Ericka Henry, and I would love to accept a friend request from you. A new project that we're working on here in Allentown is a anti-poverty asset-based community development corporation called Somos. So if you would like to check that out and get in touch with us in that area of community development, you can visit our website, somoscdc.org.
Awesome, great. And we'll put a couple links in the show notes so people can connect with you that way also. Thank you everyone for tuning in with us. If you are feeling like something has stirred within you and you don't want to walk this out anymore on your own, I offer a 30-minute free just conversation to talk about what's going on and how you can come up out of that. If you're interested in living and leading authentically, I'd love to be your coach and journey with you along the way. Until next time, lead like you.